name's Brendan O'Sullivan, a Toastmaster from Brisbane, Australia. Welcome to my Toastmasters World Tour podcast. Please join me as I travel virtually around the world and chat to Toastmasters from different countries and all walks of life. Let's explore! For this episode of Toastmasters World Tour, we're still virtually in the land of 1,000 welcomes, Céad Míle Fáilte, in Tralee, Ireland, famous amongst the Irish diaspora for its Rose of Tralee International Festival. This time chatting to Anthony Garvey. Listen into his tips on how to present naked and his well-argued case for a return to a hybrid World Championship of public speaking. Lo Éile Podrig Sonaditch, Anthony. Belated Happy St. Patrick's Day.
Oh, thank you very much. It's almost like listening to a fluent Irish speaker.
Onwil Gaelga agat?
Shato, Yogonin Gwelig gum, Tony Small Gwelga gum non quid a small democratia. So try and translate that if you can. I just said that. I've got a little bit more Irish than most of my friends. Over here, we all learn it at school, and it's part of the tradition. There are a few pockets of locations in Ireland where people speak Irish only, but that's rare. So it's rare to hear it.
Yes, in the Gaeltacht. And I've got a funny story about that, actually. Have you heard of a short film called Yu Ming is Anam Dom?
I have.
I love that movie. So you might recall it's about a Chinese, just for our listeners, it's about a Chinese guy sitting in China in a dead-end sort of job, and he's a bit depressed, and where's his life going as a young guy? And he goes to the library and he spins the globe and just sort of puts his finger randomly on the globe as it's spinning, and it lands on Ireland. So he goes and looks up Ireland and works out that the national language in the book, it says, is Irish. So he spends 6 months learning as much Irish as he can. When he arrives in Dublin, he starts asking for a room in Irish, and they clearly don't understand him. And he gets really depressed because, he's put all this effort in and no one understands him. But the guy that's on reception is actually an Aussie guy, I think.
Right. Okay. Well, there's a beautiful bit of comic timing. Really, the whole of that, it's a short film. It's about 10 minutes long. And the whole thing revolves around him discovering that the national language of Ireland is Irish. And as you say, he learns it religiously, gets off the boat, and goes into a bar. And the first person he sees, he says to him, "Conoscetá tu," and the guy says to him, "I'm sorry, mate, I don't speak Chinese."
Yeah, that's right. That's so funny. So actually, and I've got another story just before we move on about Gaelga, about Irish. Back in 1993, I was traveling around Ireland, and it wasn't uncommon to come across hitchhikers, pretty safe country, and picked up this young Irish teacher. And I think she was a bit of a scallywag and had been in trouble with the law a little bit. I think it was probably on some minor, I think she was a little bit hippie, and maybe she'd done a few minor drugs. But she was gleefully telling us how when she'd gone to court, and I'm not sure if this is still the case, but when she'd gone to court, she'd insisted upon the whole court proceedings were done in Irish. And so it was a way of getting out of some charges because she could sort of talk rings around them. So is that still the case? Can you insist on the court cases being in Irish?
I'm just adding that to my list of possible excuses. Should I ever be caught for whatever I do next in life? They're famous. There is a court case where a man was apprehended for urinating against a police car. And he was taken in and brought up in front of Justice Windle. And Justice Windle famously said, if a man's got to go, he's got to go, and let him off.
Let's segue that into another, shall I say, mildly questionable story, which I must say I loved. But on the way home from work, I was listening to the Irish Talkers podcast, and it
Oh
was
yeah,
the episode where you were doing your TEDx talk on how to present naked,
right.
hailing back to your youth in Spain. I think it was
Yes.
finding yourself working on a nudist beach. Now, how do you think? You know, I'm a skin cancer doctor. How do you think
Oh,
you went?
okay.
How do you think you went in my eyes?
Well, I yeah. Look, I was. For your listeners, I was 17 years of age, and my parents said, like, I wanted to stay on in Spain for an extra week, and my parents said, "You can do so if you find a job." And that's difficult to man for a 17-year-old. But I went round the shops. It was one of those years when the Spanish students stayed at home rather than going overseas to get jobs elsewhere. So they were very, very tight. But I finally found a job selling ice cream on a beach. My parents were happy enough with that, and off they went. And when I turned up on the first day, the guy said to me, there's your apron, there's your ice cream. All I need now is your clothes. And I was like, what? He said, your patch for the next week is the nudist beach. So, well, look, I mean, as long as you have lots of factor 50, I had an apron. So
Well,
that's safe. And believe it or not, I sold an enormous amount of ice cream. I'd kept coming back to refill my supply, but yeah, it was an experience. Got a very uneven tan.
yeah.
Whatever skin cancer, I wouldn't recommend it. Lather up with factor 50; it's your best friend.
Well, look, I was pleased. I was pleased to hear you sort of talk about lathering on like lots and lots of SPF 50 plus sunscreen. So you got a point for that. And then you also mentioned having sunnies on, so you got a point for that. But we talk about slip, slop, slap, seek, and slide. So there's five. So you've got two out of the five. You've got 40%.
Yeah.
But if I take my
Yeah, but you
doctor's,
see, the difference is in your part of the world, you actually get some sunshine.
yes, yes,
Over here in Ireland,
yeah,
and look, I'm a huge fan of the place,
yeah,
and I would encourage all your listeners to get on a plane and come over here as soon as you can if you haven't been.
yeah,
But yeah, we get a lot of rain.
yeah.
We don't see a lot of sunshine. So far we're 4 or 5 months through the year, and when I looked out the other day, the sun appeared and there were people dashing to the beach,
Yeah,
dashing.
yes, I've seen that. I've seen that. So, but if I take my doctor's hat off, I absolutely applaud the story and the the bravery. And
Good.
it sounded like you were starting to promote everyone getting up as the speakers presenting naked. Of course, you go on to explain that what that was, but I was thinking, geez, that's a reversal on, people when they're nervous can sometimes say, look, imagine everyone in the audience is naked to sort of be a bit of an
Yes.
equalizer. This
Yeah.
was sort of a bit of a
Although
turnaround.
that in real life that would probably be more distracting than anything else. No, I use the story as in the TEDx as a segue to
Mm,
encourage people to speak naked. In other words, without notes or little
yes.
cue cards.
Yeah.
That there are so many people that I see who come up and they've got their speech written out in longhand,
Yeah.
and the pages and pages, and they lose their way and they're fumbling for what they've written. They can't read their own handwriting. One of the secrets, if you remember nothing else, ladies and gentlemen, from today's presentation, what I'd encourage you to do if you're one of those people is to distill your speech down into maybe 8, 9, or 10 single words.
Mm,
So imagine you're a marketing person. You might put down price, you might put down advertising, you might put down the product, and then you can talk knowledgeably for 30 seconds, 25 seconds about each of those little points. And that will encourage you to eventually arrive at a point where you don't have slides. You don't have to rely on them.
yeah.
You can look into the whites of people's eyes and see if you can connect with them. And if you can't, if you're losing the audience, then you pivot, you change things, you stop. Whereas if you're busy looking at slides, then you've already lost half the audience, in my opinion.
100% agree. And I must say that I'm usually guilty of not rehearsing well enough, but something that saved me, one of my clubmates said years ago, often the audience won't know what you were intending to say anyhow. So if you forget something you were going to say, You just improvise a bit.
100%, 100%. And look, I had, I'll tell you about an awkward situation because I had this, it was a tricky speech that I was doing, and there were three jokes in it in the middle because I like to use humor when I can. And one of the jokes was a little bit complex, and I hadn't rehearsed sufficiently. So I was driving to the location and I was running it through in my head. But I knew that this particular joke, the punchline was tricky. So before I got up to speak, I wrote it down, the punchline, on a little card. And I was out in the middle of the audience and I was delivering the speech because, again, I like to wander rather than stay in one location. I believe that you should use your hands, you should be expressive, you should use the stage as much as possible. And I suddenly realized as I was approaching the joke, I'd forgotten what the punchline was. It'd gone clean out of my head. So I maneuvered my way backwards towards the podium where I had written this down, and it was on a card. Yep. And I reached out for a glass of water, took a sip of water, put it down, and only then did I look down at what the punchline was, saw what it was, and then continued as normal. And there was only one of the people in the audience who knew me well, who came up afterwards and said, "Why did you go backwards during that speech for a glass of water? That seemed a bit odd." But they still didn't know why I had done it. Yeah. So you know, if there's a weak point in your presentation, either change it, which is the easiest thing, or if it's really important, write it down somewhere and then find your way back to that location, hopefully without tripping over a whole lot of wires.
Excellent tip. Anthony, I believe during COVID, the World Championship of Public Speaking went online. Subsequently, it's no longer online. It's all face-to-face, in person. Do you think that's been a good idea to move back to in-person only?
Well, there have been a number of changes over the years that I think are a bit of a missed opportunity for Toastmasters International. So let me take your listeners back, because I've been in Toastmasters quite a long while. And when the World Championship was held, the finals, typically in America, you would have 10 semi-finals with 10 people in them each. So there would be 100 people who would bring their families and their friends from around the world to the Toastmasters convention. And they would all appear on the semi-final stage. And what an amazing experience that is, to give to 100 people. Now, the way the system is set up is, even if you win your district, so I see that you're in District 69, I'm a member of District 71 and District 91. When I won the International Speech Contest in District 91, I then went into a video round, which is shrouded in mystery. And out of those 10 people who were in that round, only 2 advanced. And what it means is that there are only 27 people who make it to the World Championship. Seems like an odd number, but trust me, 27 make it through instead of the 100. And you would have had loads of people arriving from all around the world at the convention previously. Now that number is severely reduced. But when COVID hit, all of the contests went online. In fact, Zoom saved Toastmasters International.
Right.
And there were no online clubs, or hardly any. And suddenly they began to spring up all around the world. The club that I'm president of this year, Shilling Speakers, moved from being a physical club to being online only. And there are a lot of very, very fine world championships who appeared online, and people started to use the technology to do all sorts of creative things. Now, Toastmasters described the fact that people could enter online as an exception, and they did what they call hybrid meetings. I'm sure your listeners are well aware of this. So you'd have people in the room who could give a speech, And you would also have people like me who might not be able to travel all around the world for various reasons, who are competing from their bedrooms or their studios or whatever, but they still had the opportunity to take part. More importantly, you have people who are sick, who are infirmed, who can't travel for whatever reason, who were suddenly able to take part in world championship contests. We have a lady who's a member of our club who's 93 years of age. Oh, and her ambition was to be world champion by the time she was 100. And that ambition is crushed. Now that the World Championship has moved back to in-person only, she can't travel. In fact, I would argue that maybe it's almost discriminating against people who, because of their disabilities, we've people who've spina bifida, we've people who've multiple sclerosis, who physically can't travel to compete. And they are now disqualified from taking part in the public speaking contest. So I passionately believe that Toastmasters could have been a leader in this whole online space. You can do so many creative things with it, but instead they decided, instead of going for the hybrid and sticking with it, they moved back to in-person only. They'll use online for training. And you can get trained anywhere in the world. But when it comes to competing, they have shut down the online possibility. And I think it's a missed opportunity. I really do. You could have, think of all of the young people who we could bring into Toastmasters. Think of how interviews are done now worldwide. Young people have to appear on this rectangular screen and sell themselves. And Toastmasters could have led in that area. But instead, they have returned to in-person only, where you have to have your shirt and your tie and sit in a stuffy room for 5, 6, 7 hours while you compete. Isn't it much better to use the technology and, or at least a blend of both, to give people the option?
Yeah, no, I see your point. Have you tried to take that up with the people that sort of call the shots?
Well, I'm one of those people who, if I get a bee in my bonnet, I try and change it. So I wrote to the president of Toastmasters International, and he said, "Oh yeah, well, talk to the rules committee. They'll be reviewing it in November." And I wrote to them as well with a pitch. I even considered doing a piece for the newspapers. But look, I'm part of Toastmasters, and I want the organization to succeed. Yes. So I believe that we can chart our own course, and in a way, Shilling Speakers, our little online club, we're being innovative despite the restrictions that are put on us. We still run our club contest, right? Our winner this year, our club technically is based in England, so our area finals are in England. Okay. The winner of the international speech contest in our club comes from California. Yeah, so they would have to relocate to England for a couple of months, hope that they win the area final and the division final, and then get through to the district. The person who was second has multiple sclerosis, right? So suddenly you're down to your third place person who's in France. So it's not realistic to expect people to drop everything so that they can compete. They should be afforded the opportunity to compete beyond the club level stage, would be my personal opinion.
Do you think it will come where they will allow hybrid back in the international convention?
No, I don't. I think it's gone. I think it's a missed opportunity. I think, sadly, the only way it'll come back is if there is a COVID Mark II and the organization is in peril again and people can't meet in person. I understand the dynamics of meeting in person. Like, I'm a member of both an in-person club and one that meets online, and I see the differences. But look, let me highlight it to your listeners in just one simple sentence. I live in a rural part of Ireland, and in the winter, I have to get into the car on a cold winter's evening with ice on the road, drive to a cold community hall, sit there, meet the same people. Now they're warm, they're interesting people, and then come home, have to cook dinner for myself, and my kids are already in bed. I've missed them for the night. The alternative to that is that I can have my dinner with my kids. I can log on to Zoom. I can do my meeting with shilling speakers, and I'm still there in time to tuck my kids into bed. And there's no risk to my car or other people out on the roads, and I'm not freezing cold. I'm nice and warm. So there's a huge advantage. It's different things, but why close the door on online? I think actually what's going to happen is that it's not the direction of travel that the Toastmasters wants to go, and there will be pockets of people who pop up around the world, like what you're doing, where you're having a virtual tour of the world by dropping in on different people. That's a brilliant use of the technology. So I think that's fantastic, but sadly, I think the direction of travel is in the other we're heading in the other way.
Well, I think you make a very strong argument, and I think it's worth keeping the conversation going. You just never know. When you're in person, you get to use a bit of stagecraft. What do you think of that? Do you think there's too much stagecraft and theatrics, or do you think there should be less?
Well, here's another area where perhaps I diverge from the direction that Toastmasters is traveling in. I like drama, and I like going to the theatre, and I like watching people use the whole width of the stage and appeal to the audience and draw people in. And I think that Toastmasters should do that now, or at least have the option of doing it. But there is a move at the moment. The Toastmasters International have they've commissioned a paper, and they're arguing that the content is more important than the style and the delivery. And I disagree. I really do think that the way that you deliver your argument is just as important, or maybe sometimes more important than the actual message that you're trying to get across. At the very least, there's room for both. But there's a move away in terms of marking the International Speech Contest. They're beginning to focus more on content. And I accept that content is really really important. But in the online forum, I was just telling you earlier that we had a speech contest. One of the people dressed up as a prisoner, and they had designed a cell for themselves. They were able to reach out and grab hold of the virtual bars and shake them, which was very effective. Something you wouldn't be able to do in person. There was someone else who was sitting in Santa's sleigh. Think of the expense of trying to recreate that in a live environment. Sure, you could come in a Santa uniform, but it wasn't as good because we could see him flying through the air, and delivering presents down to the houses because he used the technology well. There was someone else who, in their hands, they were able to make a light appear, virtual light appear. Again, you could do the same thing with matches, but you'd be fiddling around with them forever. It's so much easier to use the technology to do this in a creative way. So in terms of designing meetings that appeal to people, you can reach around the world to get speakers from anywhere. So when we have Irish Night, for example, is one of the big nights in Shilling Speakers. I invite Irish people who are all over the world to come and speak. And instead of being restricted to your local catchment area or having to pay for people to fly in and stay with you or stay in a hotel, I can get really, really experienced people from all over the world to come to our meeting and deliver sensational speeches that really captivate our audience. And the quality of meetings is so much higher. So, I mean, here's, your travels around the world will give you experiences and flavors that you would never get in real life. And you're able to do them virtually from your own home.
Yes.
What a sensational experience that is too.
Well, the world's our oyster, isn't it?
Oh,
And
yeah.
I think what you're really getting at with the delivery versus the content, I agree. I think both are super important. Ultimately, what is going to get your audience engaged and people want to keep coming back to Toastmasters?
Yeah, I mean, I part of what I do for a living. Like I'm very fortunate. I'm a PR guy by trade, so get you in the media, keep you out of the media. But thanks to Toastmasters, I now teach people how to present for a living, and I'll go into organizations and I will watch people deliver their presentations. I'll suggest things that they can do differently, or I'll do them online, and I'll watch how they deliver online, if they're doing interviews or if they're presenting their annual results. You can see by watching them areas where they can improve their communication skills. And one of the things that I suggest to them is, whatever the most important point in your presentation is, after you deliver it, pause for a second or two.
Mm-hmm.
Let it soak in with people. Watch the reaction. And, nod your head, particularly online. People, if you stop talking online, people will think that you've frozen. So you need to move your head while you're making your point. In real life, fair enough, you can pause and close your eyes and not say anything at all, and it's very, very effective. But keep your head moving when you're when you're making when you're not saying anything, and nod away, and it's a really effective way of communicating.
Makes sense. The power of the pause. Thanks for listening to today's show. One of the key elements of Toastmasters is evaluations. This is how we grow and improve, both by encouraging comments for things we got right and points for improvement. We all learn and benefit from these evaluations, not just the person being evaluated. So any feedback in the comments is greatly appreciated. If you have a Toastmasters story you'd like to share or would like to be on the show, I'd love to hear from you. You can reach me at toastmastersworldtour@gmail.com. Thanks for listening.